Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever the fuck you're listening or watching. This is another episode of RosinBaggers NL Central Preview. We are without Mr. Gary Freeze tonight. He's got a bag of dicks in his face tonight, but hey, that's not stopping him from watching and listening at the comfort of his own couch at home tonight. But I do have my cohort, Ty. How you doing, bud?
Doing well, certainly without the bag of dicks in my face and ready to talk some NL Central and throw some shit in your face because, of course, as you can clearly see, we have got the beautiful Busch Stadium behind us. We have our Cardinals jersey on. We have our Cardinals memorabilia, if you will. Awesome 3D printer stuff. And then you've got the Cubs stuff behind you. So, there's going to be a little NL Central mashup as we talk about the best division in all of baseball. And here's the best part. We are getting so close to this podcast and having meaningful games to talk about. One more NL West preview to get to next week. And then it is on to the regular season. I am so looking forward to it.
It's crazy that we literally have 2 weeks until opening day. It's crazy. It really is. And Gary Freeze Sr., let's get a season started. Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you look back to compare this year to where we were last year, last year, we knew we had a season that was going to be starting, at this point. But if you backtrack about a month or so, we didn't know if we were going to have a season,
right?
And so it's crazy what a difference a year can make. But man, this is the month of March, and you're probably going to agree with me, just because of the sports fan that I know you are.
Mm-hmm.
We got March Madness starting tomorrow, and in 2 weeks, we will have the start of the Major League Baseball season. March is probably one of the greatest sports months that there is.
Absolutely. And it just finally kicks February in the teeth, because February is the most dull, boring, god-awful month of sports that there is in the history of everything, because it's just basically everything coming to essentially a conclusion on the college basketball side of things. And then, your NHL and your NBA, they're stuck in like mid-season, halfway through the grind. It's awful. And then you get March, and then you get springtime, and then you get later nights because the sun stays out longer, because we finally got the time set on the right time. Let's not fall back anymore, idiots. So you get that out, and you're staying up later, and you're watching games, you're having fun. It's just great, man. I'm so looking forward to it. But like Free Senior said, especially when you're a Braves fan and you're a fan of a contender.
Yeah.
You hate these spring training games because it's like, oh my God, here we go. We've got 2 more weeks. Can we keep everybody healthy to at least get off the season on a strong start? But what I've liked about this spring training, as opposed to obviously last year, we had the awful labor negotiations that, in today's day and age of social media, everything, the dirty laundry of the sport was getting aired out in the public. And it was awful. From those that have been behind the game since day one, since they were in diapers like me. It was really shitty to see that get aired out into the national media. But this year, like, everything is completely different, because you have such a coming together from a standpoint of a fan base. You have a fan base where you had your diehards, and you had your tried and trues that are adapting to this new wave of a fan base, and with these new rules, and these new rules have the data is almost insane when you take a look at game times, and that's ushered in this brand new wave of fans. And obviously there's still things that need to get worked out, and kinks that need to get worked out. I hate the fact that an at bat has to end on an out because you weren't in the box in time and the time ran out. I can't stand seeing shit like that. But we're going to adapt, and we're going to change. And then you have 32 countries competing in a World Baseball Classic. And you have and my favorite part about it, and granted, baseball-wise, it can be pretty dull. You're watching the Dominican Republic put up 15-0 results against the Czech Republic or China or Greece. But what I enjoy is like watching everyday people, watching a Gary, a you, a me, out there on the diamond, because these are just guys with day jobs in some of these other countries, going up against the biggest stars in Major League Baseball, going up against the guys that they pay money to see and they watch on TV. And then you have the stories of the guy that goes through the heart of the Dominican Republican order and strikes out 3 batters in a row and gets picked up by the Tigers in a bullpen deal. Like, that's cool shit.
Yeah.
I love seeing those kind of stories. Again, the product is what it is, but the stories that you get and seeing baseball in a different competitive atmosphere than practice squads playing against each other in a meaningless spring training game is pretty cool. And that's why this March and this offseason has been such a breath of fresh air in compared to a year ago.
Yeah. I actually kind of forgot about the WBC until you mentioned it. I mean, granted, we've talked about it, in our group messaging and everything else, but yeah, you forget that it's going on right now because it's kind of overshadowed by the spring training, which in all actuality, it should be the opposite.
Right.
The World Baseball Classic, where you have the big names, you have some big names, and you have up and comers, or you have nobodies playing in the World Baseball Classic. And I don't know if you saw it or not. And we'll get to our NL Central preview here after this, but Shohei Ohtani got struck out by, I can't remember what country the guy played for,
right?
But the dude was like a laborer. He was an electrician and struck Shohei out, and Shohei signed a jersey, and his teammates signed it as well and presented it to the guy. And that's what makes the World Baseball Classic the World Baseball Classic and makes it what it is. Yes, you have all-stars, but you also have, these no-name individuals playing for the name on the front. And it takes me back to, this last month where you had, the anniversary of the 1980 Miracle on Ice, where you had, basically just college players playing in the Olympics. And right after that, then they went to an all-star Olympic team, and so it really makes you appreciate the World Baseball Classic for what it is. Because, yeah, it's a mixture of everybody. It's not just the MLB All-Stars, playing against the Puerto Rican MLB All-Stars. It's a combination of just everyone. And that's what makes it so special to me.
Absolutely. And it brings it full circle. I mean, the fact that this game started with essentially for everybody, and anybody and everybody that wanted to play could play the game. And as you progress through and get more competitive as you get older, obviously the thimble narrows a little bit in terms of who gets pushed through, but it just goes back to the roots, and it's awesome. And one tiny adjustment that I would make in the WBC is the championship game next year, or when they have it again in 2026, I believe. I think it's every 4-year cycle or 3-year cycle. They need to have it at the Field of Dreams Stadium. I want to see the championship game at the Field of Dreams Stadium. I think that would be so cool.
That would be. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's get down to it. Let's get into our NL Central preview. Starting with number 5. Ty, who you got at number 5? And I think we're both going to be on the same page here.
Chicago, obviously, right? They did nothing. They have nothing. The Cubs will be maybe a 5-win team this year. No, number 5, coming in at number 5, because where else are you going to go, right? The famous words from the ownership a year ago when he sold the team, and a week before the regular season, essentially shipped everybody off to 13 different directions in Cincinnati. What was the at that point in time going to be a very competitive baseball team suddenly became a joke. And that joke, unfortunately, the tagline hasn't expired yet for the Cincinnati fan base. It is still ongoing. And this roster is an absolute disaster apart from maybe Joey Votto and Jonathan India. The two guys that come to mind when I think about the Cincinnati Reds. Obviously, India had a season a year ago where he was really sidelined with some lingering injury issues, and I think that prevented him from taking that next step in his career after a very promising rookie start. Joey Votto is going to be a lifetime, just career crushing guy at the plate. Obviously, a few steps removed. He changed his walk-up music last year to Dolly Parton. That was a huge mistake because he went in a huge-ass slump after Dolly. Don't change your music to Dolly Parton. We go to baseball stadiums not to hear that shit. Then you got some, Tyler Stevenson, Jake Freely. They added Will Myers. They have some pop, but there's the overall consensus that I have in looking at Cincinnati is that lineup just doesn't stack up with the rest of the division. And quite frankly, that lineup doesn't stack up with a few teams in AAA right now. This is going to be a bad baseball team. Hunter Green is a absolute flamethrower. You don't get his. Hunter Green is going to look untouchable at times. And unfortunately, he is the ace on a staff that doesn't have a 2. And quite frankly, doesn't have 2 through 5. The starting rotation is rough. The bullpen has issues. The lineup, as mentioned, apart from a few key pieces, is in shambles, and this team will be a circus.
Yeah, I totally agreement with you here. I got the Reds at number 5 as well too. Votto had a down year last year, and you mentioned it. They shipped a ton of guys right before the start of the season, and they were just a year removed, from making the playoffs. And then you do that. They had an atrocious year last year. Votto was a shell of himself. He's 39 this year. Is this his last year? Possibly. And honestly, if I'm Joey Votto, I'm looking and seeing, what you're going to do, what management's going to do. Likely nothing, because they did the year prior. So then it's almost one of those things. Do you ask for a trade? Do you, at the trade deadline to a contender, get in the playoffs, get that chance at getting a World Series ring? You mentioned their pitching. You got Hunter Green, who at times last year, was lights out, and then you get to a secondary pitch, and it's non-existent. He was like 5-13, 5-14 last year with a 4.44 ERA. But again, he's a flamethrower. If he can get some command of his secondary pitches, watch out. He will be, unhittable. But you also have Graham Ashcroft as well. Kind of the same similar situation as Green. Secondary pitches as well for him. Wasn't able to command. And he also had, almost a 5 ERA. One guy that we need to be on the lookout for the Reds is Ellie De La Cruz. I think he's a top 10 prospect for him. Stud shortstop. So kind of see when and if he gets the call up to the majors. But totally in agreement with you here on the Reds at number 5. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Joey Votto's last season as a Red.
That's
and
tough.
maybe
looks like they've just optioned De La Cruz as of today. In fact, so looks like he'll start the season in AAA. Yeah, he'll start in AAA, but it'll be interesting to watch his developments. And I think it's kind of an O'Neal Cruz situation. They're not quite sure if he's ready just yet. Yeah, there was no way Pittsburgh, and we'll get to the Pirates here in a minute. There was no way they were going to hold O'Neal Cruz back after putting up the numbers he did in AAA, and it could be a very similar situation. And quite frankly, their middle infield needs help now, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's a relatively short stint in the minors. But just to get the head right, just to get the swing right, and you're right on Hunter Green. And damn it, if they had any other pitching, I could really see Hunter Green as a closer. Votto's last season, maybe not. The designated hitter is going to extend the shelf life a little bit. I have trouble seeing him go at the trade deadline, not because of his loyalty to Cincinnati. I had trouble seeing him going at the trade deadline because, quite frankly, the teams that are going to be contenders
already have. Yeah,
they don't need him. Their lineups are good. They've got their DH and they've weaponized that position. I don't see him moving at the trade deadline because I don't see it piquing the interest meter of a contender. Now, unless you have like a Baltimore who's hanging around and has a shot.
Yeah.
I could see Votto going and for like a 1-year deal before he goes back to Cincinnati to retire as a Red. But I would be very tough pressed to see him land on a contender unless there's an absolute need at the deadline.
Sure. All right, Ty. Moving on to number 4. Who you got at number 4?
You're not going to like who I've got at number 4. I do have this your landing spot for the Chicago Cubs, which I will say as we move forward here with the Cubs.
Yeah.
And you will not hear this out of me very often. I was kind of bored last year as a Cardinals fan because the race was pretty anticlimactic. Milwaukee shot themselves in the foot, and everybody else was so far down the ladder that it was, we could have dropped the last 14 games of the season. We could have been okay. I missed the Cubs' competitiveness, and it sounds weird for me to say that because I will on any given baseball day cheer for the Cardinals and whoever the hell is playing the Cubs. But I missed your Chicago Cubs a little bit. And the NL Central, I think you would agree, was just not near as much fun without Chicago hanging around.
Yep.
You're going to take a few steps forward. You're not going to take that big leap I think that a lot of Chicago fans are hoping for. But damn good offseason for the Cubs front office in a offseason where I wasn't, and I was really intrigued to see where Chicago would go and how they would play it. And would they go put pieces that are going to be a part of this puzzle together. And quite frankly, they've patched things up very nicely. It might be bubblegum and twisty ties on the outside perspective looking in, but there's a lot of pieces that you can be extremely excited for, and I'll hit on 2 of them, and I will let you, the Cub fan, take care of the rest. But I love the Dansby Swanson addition in the middle. Obviously, you hate to see some of those infielders that you gave up to have to make that an availability. But Dansby is just a damn good baller, and he's going to be missed in Atlanta. Ozzie Albies is the next up-and-comer. He'll be fine. You got Grissom in there as well. But Dansby's going to be a solid producer for him. You already know I'm a Trey Mancini guy. He's not one I want to hit on, but he did get added, which is a big. Hosmer's still got pop in the bat. He's going to be able to take things easy at first base, transition over to DH in a few games if needed. The other guy I really love that the Cubs were able to acquire was a New York Yankee. Before then, he was a Pittsburgh Pirate, and it's Jameson Taillon. And here's why I really like it. Because Jameson Taillon is going to come in to this rotation behind Stroman, more than likely.
Yep.
But he's got the book. He's got the scouting report on a lot of those hitters in his own division, which I think is a huge advantage for Chicago. I think Taillon bounces back in a big, big way and gets back to some of the numbers that made him such lucrative trade bait to begin with when he went over to New York. He didn't transition well in the pinstripes. I think he will do great here in Chicago, and I think he's going to love being Cub. I really do. I think his career and his stock is rising tremendously because of that acquisition. But like I said, they filled and did a lot of good things. I still think they're maybe a year, possibly 2 away from getting into the blow for blow at the top of the NL Central. But I see the Cubs having a very solid season, and so solid that we're gonna give it lucky sevens today, double sevens, 77 wins for Chicago, a 4th place finish, because there's gonna be some interesting competition towards the top.
Well, I will. I'll save my Cub talk for when I talk about the Cubs further on up the ladder in the Central Division. But for me at number 4, I have the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Okay.
And this was an odd year for the Pirates. They actually spent money.
Well said.
And I'm being serious.
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh is the East Coast team of the Oakland A's on the West Coast. They don't go out and spend money. One of the key additions that they signed was Kutch. They brought Andrew McCutchen back. Yeah. Great for them. I hated to see Kutch go when they did because he was a Pittsburgh Pirate through and through. You know, he's one of those guys that, you know, you hate seeing leave an organization because the organization just kind of effed him over. Mm-hmm. You know, like Rizzo, you know, for me. You know, and I'm sure you have, you know, maybe Harrison Bader for you or something like that. You know, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, but at 4, I have the Pirates. Carlos Santana, Ji-Man Choi. You know, they added those couple veterans along with a Kutch as well. And you mentioned his name earlier, O'Neill Cruz, stud last year. He was the only bright spot on the Pittsburgh Pirates, the only bright spot last year. Right. Rotation sucks. It's an old rotation. I don't care if you brought in Rich Hill. He's not the Rich Hill that the freaking Dodgers had during, you know, the mid 2012 to 2018, 2019. You have a old, almost run down starting rotation.
Definitely depreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those reasons, I know you need veteran leadership on your team for the young guys. Now, the one bright spot that the Pirates do have is they do actually have a bright farm system. Now, whether or not they use that farm system or trade them, you know, like it seems like Pittsburgh has done in the past, you know, time will tell. But for me right now, Pirates are 4 with that rotation. They don't have pitching. O'Neill Cruz, the only bright spot. You brought Kutch back, great, and you brought in a couple other, you know, veteran leaders that, you know, are good offensively and somewhat sound defensively. I just don't think it's enough, honestly, to move the needle for me.
That's fair. I'll talk about the Pirates coming up here a little bit later on the show. It might be a little bit more later on. We might have them a little bit higher than even some people might be thinking here on the show. And I'm going to give you one little preview. Offense wins a lot of games in baseball, and be on the lookout for the Pirates preview coming up here in about 15, 20 minutes from now.
Wow. All righty. All right. So that was number 4. Let's move on to number 3. Who you got at number 3 then, Ty?
I am so excited to give you my 3rd place prediction because I cannot wait. I wanted to talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates here, but we're not going to, because there's one more team that continues to, how do I want to put this? They defy logic when it comes to front office decisions. They had, keyword is had, they had a baseball team last year that was poised to not only get to the postseason, but was poised to make probably a little bit of a run in the postseason. And then
the trade deadline
strikes. And on a wild hair up your ass, getting hit with a bag full of baby dicks. I don't know what. Management in Milwaukee decided that they would just go ahead and ship off the closer, Josh Hader, to the Padres. And things sort of spiraled from there. And it is tried and true. It is lockstep with Milwaukee baseball over the last 10 years. And if you followed the Central enough, you know that give Milwaukee enough time, they'll find a way to F it up. And last year, it was at the trade deadline, and the Cardinals swooped in and took advantage. This year, for Milwaukee, I'm going to say they continue to backpedal. They continue to go in reverse. And I don't see and didn't see really, apart from the addition of William Contreras at the catching position, which is great. They needed it.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot here that strikes me as a team that's ready to get back and go for another run in the Central. They added some utility pieces. Winker, at the designated hitter position, but he had a little bit of a down year in Seattle. Brian Anderson had some good years over in Miami with the Fish. I don't think he's an everyday guy. I think he's a utility and a specialist that comes in with right-handed pitching. Yelich and Willy Adames at the top of the lineup, that's great. Rowdy Tellez is one scary guy that I don't want to pitch to because he hits the ball and he hits the ball far. But depth is big in baseball. And if you're going to make a run and you're going to play 162 games, you're going to need some depth. And I look at this bench and I'm like, who are the rest of the guys that they could essentially call up? You know, they got rid of Wong. And Colton Wong, other than being a 13-time Gold Glove winner, I think he's played 12 seasons and I gave him 13 Gold Gloves. Other than winning a Gold Glove essentially every time that he's on the field, he's a damn good 285 hitter too. And is going to hit for average. He's going to give you a lot of speed, and you lose that in the middle of the infield. And you bring up a potential prospect who we don't know a whole lot about, has not made a lot of noise in spring. Milwaukee, to me, just seems very, very, very bland, very blah. Now, their pitching staff, yeah, we know the rotation on its day can be really, really good. But they were really, really good in 2020. 2021. They weren't really good in 2022. The ERA inflated a little bit. The wins went down. Burns and Woody just didn't look like Burns and Woody like they did in the version 2 years ago. Milwaukee's flat for me, and they don't move my meter at all. It's weird to say this as a fan of the Central and looking at my potential competitors and who's going to give the Cardinals the most scare. Milwaukee probably scares me less than the Cubs, but I think that they're deeper than Chicago is right now in terms of 1 through 9, not in terms of the overall depth of from an organizational standpoint, but in terms of that batting lineup and in terms of that starting rotation. I give the edge to Milwaukee over the course of 162 games. But I think in a 5-game series, if you go Chicago and Milwaukee right now, I would take the Cubs, to be honest. Milwaukee is a flat third for me. So much flat third that they are hitting 85 and missing the postseason. Bye, Brewers.
You hit the nail on the head, and I have them at 3 here too. I have them at 3.
Nice.
And it's Yelich. Yeah, he's a great player, but he's last year below his average, below his home run average. You saw the decline. You've seen the decline ever since that first year that he was a Milwaukee Brewer. And like you said, with their rotation, it's pretty solid. Yeah. But at the same time, they weren't as good last year. That ERA went up. They traded their closer like out of the blue. Don't know why they did that. And that's just where they went downhill.
Mm-hmm.
Once they did that, it was like, see ya, Brewers. Like it wasn't a contest anymore for the Central Division last year. But no, I'm right with you on basically lockstep on everything you said. They're average. They're average, and I think that's why they're right there in the middle of the Central Division. So yeah.
They haven't felt threatening since the Hader trade, and nothing they've done since the Hader trade has made them get back into the conversation.
Yeah,
you know?
totally agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Third.
Absolutely. All right, so that's number 3. So going to be pretty interesting here for number 2. Because I really don't see you putting your Cardinals at number 2. But for me, who knows? You know,
Now you got 2 teams left, I believe.
I do.
And one is a little bit more nearer and dearer to your heart than the other.
It is.
Be very curious to see your
Yeah.
number 2. Listen, I'm going to raise the Jolly Roger flag pretty high, but I'm not going to raise it high enough to get past this little St. Louis arch that you see there in the background. Back there, I can't point. It's like
Other way.
the weather thing, anyways. Pittsburgh's going to be damn good, and I'm going to blame Gary on this because he sold me on it, and I didn't originally have Pittsburgh at 2. And when I had put pen on paper on predictions and took the what was the Pacoda rankings and kind of adjusted those to where I felt maybe they would fall, I did not have Pittsburgh at 2. To be honest, I probably didn't even have them at 3. And then Gary got me a little bit excited, kind of like his shooting the crying wolf before you needed to last year with the Texas Rangers. I think if he was on this pod, he was on this pod, this would be his dark horse team. And I'm pretty convinced about that. So I'll double down for him, and I'll eat crow if we have to at the end of the season. But I'm riding high on the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I'm riding high on the Pittsburgh Pirates because, like I said, offense is going to win you a lot of games. And you were dead on. You were spot on. This pitching is awful. When you go right down to it and you take a look at 1 through 5 on the rotation, and their 1 doesn't go into the St. Louis's 5, that's an issue. Pittsburgh's pitching will struggle. Or will it be a little bit like Baltimore and you're able to white knuckle it just enough that your offense is going to get you 6 or 7 runs a game and you're going to win a lot of damn games? And that's where I think that Pittsburgh is going to fall into. Because you said, O'Neal Cruz, right? Super StatCast machine. He is the perfect face for the StatCast era. And personally, he is my pick next year to be the cover athlete of MLB The Show if he puts up the numbers he did this year, because he's incredible. He's superhuman, and he's fun to watch. You also have a guy that spent the majority of the season, over 100 games, on the disabled list, and that's Ke'Bryan Hayes. His career has been riddled with injuries, and it has got off to a very, very promising yet very, very shaky start because he has not been healthy. As a baseball fan, not necessarily a fan of the Pittsburgh Pirates, but as a baseball fan in general, I want to see this guy get 162. I mean, obviously he's not going to play an entire season, but I want to see him with an entire season of health because I think his numbers could skyrocket and his stock could rise. You mentioned Cruz last year as the individual offensive athlete / weapon for the Pirates. And I think Brian Reynolds would have something to say about that because Brian Reynolds had a stellar season. He's not crushing the ball out of the yard. He's not hitting and making the highlight reels, but he's doing everything right. He's hitting the ball into the
trade out of there.
He's getting the extra base hits. He very well might, because his stock is huge right now. Yeah. And go get yourself some pay if you want to. Well, Brian Reynolds would be an interest. If Reynolds moves out of the pitcher, the Pittsburgh projection changes drastically because I think that he is a guy that's going to come in and do all the little things right that a baseball team needs to be successful throughout the course of a 162 game season. So Reynolds has to hang in for Pittsburgh to be at 2. If he is, they'll get there. Also, rookie Jack Sawinski last year crushes it. He is fast. He has power. He reminds me of Harrison Bader when he first came into the league. You mentioned Bader a little bit earlier. He's got the power. He's got the speed. He is the epitome of an everyday outfielder for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think this offense is an offense that's going to average 9 runs a game. And I think they're going to be awfully tough to beat because I don't think enough teams have the firepower to get into a track meet with them. I think this team races out to 88 wins and makes the playoffs. Pittsburgh, a team that I put on a 4-year window to get back into the postseason, to go on a 4-year run. We've accelerated that, and I'm moving up their timetable a hell of a lot sooner. It's now a 2-year run, and Pittsburgh will see the postseason this season.
Wow.
Big swing. Big swing.
You're making projections like the freaking Yankees last year. Their starting lineup and their runs per game average.
I'm all in.
Wow.
Raise the Jolly Roger.
All right. Well, I think by the end of May, time will tell. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We could be right out of the gate. No question about it. Pittsburgh could drop the first 10 games, and I could be like, well, that was fun.
That was fun, guys.
Probably better get them on a featured series early on the pod. We might not do much.
Oh. All right. So your number 2 is the Pirates. My number 2 will come as no shock to anybody. I'm putting my Cubs. I'm putting my Cubs there. And this, I'm not going to lie with you, Ty. I was flip-flopping them between 2 and 3, between the Brewers and the Cubs. Okay? And I'm not necessarily sold like you are with the offseason moves that they made. Yes, Dansby Swanson, great addition. You got Hosmer over there at first base. You got Trey Mancini, and you got Cody Bellinger in there as well.
Forgot about Cody.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the batting on him, has gone downhill past couple of years, but still great defensive outfielder. You couple that with Suzuki out there, who was a rookie last year, who had a decent rookie campaign, was injured a little bit, so didn't get to see, I actually had him as, my rookie of the year last year. Gary Freese, if Ty's right, scoring 9 runs a game, I mean, you might as well just chalk it up 162 game win season right there.
I think they'll give up 10 plenty of times. That's the problem.
True. But so my biggest concern with the Cubs, and it is for a lot of the teams that we've covered, but obviously being a fan favorite of the Cubs, is the pitching staff. And yes, you mentioned his name, Jameson Taillon. Yes, great addition. That was the only addition really that the Cubs made to the pitching staff this year. You have Kyle Hendricks, who you're still paying. You gave an absurd amount of money to. I don't think you should have gave it to him, but you did. You're stuck with it. He's starting the season on the IL. So you're going into the season with Stroman as your number 1. Probably Taillon is your number 2, and throw in a Drew Smyly in there until you get Hendricks back. So their starting pitching is subpar to me. And then your bullpen pitching, they got to figure out bullpen pitching still, to me. And obviously they need another starter in there that can go 6-7 innings. But I still think they are ahead of the Brewers in those aspects. Now, obviously, starting pitching, no. But I think offensively, they can get to the Brewers starting pitching. And, that's where I think that, and defensively, I think that's where the Cubs will get some extra wins offensively and defensively. And so that's where I'm putting them ahead of the Brewers. I think they made a little bit more of a splash this offseason, obviously, than the Brewers did. Brewers have kind of remained stagnant. So I'm putting the Cubs at number 2. But I'm kind of right there at maybe an 85 win season for them. And if they get 85 wins and they don't make any moves at the trade deadline, they don't add any starting pitching or anything else like that, I'm going to be honestly, I'll be a happy camper. because they just haven't made those pitching moves like they did back in 15, 16, where they needed to. They've spent their money elsewhere where it's hurt them. And they need to start spending it on their pitching and bullpen work in order to have a chance at making a run at the division where I know your Cardinals will be.
Yeah. One question for the peanut gallery here, for the Cubs fan, because here's where it starts. You had to go through, from a fan base perspective, a rebuild. St. Louis hasn't done one since about 93. It's been a while for the Cardinals since they've had to do the rebuild. Unfortunately, I've seen it on the hockey side of things now, being a Blues fan, and I know that the amount of shit and pain that you go through from a fan, that you have to endure and watch crappy baseball like you've had to do, unfortunately, especially last season. Is Chicago in a point where, I guess, what's the temperature? Is it we need to have a drastically better season and need to start being competitive immediately? Or is there faith in the Cubs faithful in the process, and that a step forward, even though it might not result in postseason, will actually be an acceptable year?
Yeah, I think so. And you mentioned rebuilds, and here's what I'm looking at as far as a rebuild and these teams. You look at the Cardinals. Name one of your players that you've had past 20 years that was an all-star, face of the franchise. Cardinals didn't pay him.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, you look at number 5, but
yeah. So you let Pujols walk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you keep that money in house. And you spread that out evenly. To the guys that are your pitchers. All those guys that most of your core. You go out, you get some free agents. You build your farm system, and that's one thing that the Cubs have done. Is they have a top 10 farm system. They've had that since probably 2013.
100%.
But it hasn't translated to the big leagues because they're either trading them, or they're spending an absurd amount of money on players that they shouldn't. Now, you didn't spend the money on Schwarber. You didn't spend the money on Baez. You spent the money on Hendricks. You didn't spend the money on Contreras. You didn't spend the money on Bryant. So then my question is, okay, where the fuck is this money going to then? Because we haven't gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
So to go back to answer your question, yes, improvement obviously is needed. And I think a lot of the pieces are there for that. Will it translate? I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I hope so. But I do believe that they need to go spend some money on a starting pitcher and some bullpen help in order to make it a more realistic outcome. But yeah, I think if they are high 3, obviously 2, in the division this year, and they're competitive, where they're not getting blown out or anything like that, then yeah, I think it will be enough to keep the needle moving for them, and then in all actuality, keep Ross's job. Now, whether or not he's a good manager or not, it kind of remains to be seen, because you basically just have 2 years so far under his belt, and 1 year's last year is kind of almost a rebuild, start of a rebuild year.
Yeah, he hasn't had the ponies in the stable to have a fair shake.
Yeah, exactly. So time will tell.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
And it's very interesting. And if people that are listening to the pod and you have two different people and two different opinions, and one is the same, and that's the third place team with the Milwaukee Brewers. Here's the interesting thing and as I was listening to you talk a little bit about Chicago, the reasoning that we both have two different teams ahead of Milwaukee is now painfully obvious. And there's some momentum. There's some excitement. And I think we can take a look back at last year's Baltimore Orioles and draw a perfect comparison, because Baltimore was who they were. They didn't have the extra flash in the pan. They didn't have a lot of stars, but they enter into Adley Rutschman territory, and it tells the clubhouse immediately, hey, we're going to make a run for this. We're going to try to be competitive. We are giving you our best prospects in our farm system. Go do baseball. And it immediately changed the attitude and the atmosphere in that clubhouse. And you saw Baltimore was overachieving last year at times. And I think that there's a lot that can be said about momentum in a clubhouse and where the players even feel that the team is going to go. I think you're going to see some of the early returns. Milwaukee sitting back and saying, dude, the hell are we doing? Like, we're losing guys left and right. You lose your closer a year ago. Now we lose our Gold Glove guy in the middle of the infield, and some of the pop has been taken away from our bats, and our management isn't giving us enough pieces to be competitive. They'll start flat. I have no doubt Milwaukee will start flat. And teams like Pittsburgh and Chicago, where you have a little bit of a buzz because of your offseason, is starting to percolate around the stadium at PNC Park and Wrigley Field. You are going to have these two baseball teams, in my opinion, overachieve to begin the year. And then momentum is everything. You're playing winning baseball, and all of a sudden it doesn't matter if you were a AA player a year ago. You get some momentum on your side, you're going to go places. I think Chicago and Pittsburgh stocks up. I think Milwaukee's is down.
Yeah. All right. Well, that just leaves us for the number one spot, and we are in agreement here, unfortunately. I'm just going to go out here and say it, and I'll let you have the floor since this is your team.
Thank you.
Wilson Contreras can go suck a bag of dicks. Your time.
You're okay. Wilson Contreras, welcome to the St. Louis baseball fan base. Welcome to the best fans in baseball. Welcome to the best baseball city. Welcome to a city that is has their eye on a prize that is lost in my graphic. There it is, World Series trophy. I don't think that they're going to get to the World Series at this point, but I'm really high on St. Louis, and I'm high on St. Louis because this is just a really well put together, despite their best efforts, and despite sometimes I get really pissed off at John Mosliak and the management team, and sometimes they do take guys that are near and dear to my heart, guys that I watched up go through the minors and then to make the big leagues, and then they trade them off to the pinstripes. Ultimately, that trade ended up being pretty much 50-50. Montgomery had a hell of a bounce back year that I didn't think he was going to have. Good stuff. The rotation is aging a little bit, and that concerns me greatly moving forward with St. Louis. And there's still some question marks on some of these guys. Jack's Jack. He's a hell of a thrower, but God knows how many Tommy John surgeries removed, and he just needs to stay healthy. And if he stays healthy and is a part of this rotation, you're going to see St. Louis continue to get off to and continue their winning ways. Montgomery, like I mentioned, from the Yankees a year ago, had a hell of a bounce back and really closed out the season, was probably our most reliable pitcher down the stretch, which was weird to me because I was pissed off about that trade. And I thought that the losing Harris and Bader was essentially, I didn't think the sun was ever going to shine again. I got to be honest with you. You've experienced it as a Cubs fan when one of your players, when one of the guys that you root for on a daily basis leaves, it sucks. But Montgomery did extremely exceptionally well. And I'm looking forward to him again in 2023 and hopefully continuing that momentum that he had to close out 2022. Matt is a sinker ball thrower. He's going to throw it to call it contact. His ERA can go, be 0.7 or 7.5, just depending on what day you get. Wayno, God, he's up there. It's his last year. It's going to be a hell of a ride for him. I think he's really just settled into what I love about Wainwright is that he settled in and just enjoyed the ride over the last couple of years. And he's doing things that normal Major League Baseball players would never do, like randomly get up out of the bullpen and go watch the game in the stands with fans and talk about baseball with fans. Like he's just having a hell of a time. And I love to see that. But yeah, the zip on his velocity ain't the same, and his 12.6 doesn't break like it used to. And sometimes it's flat, and when it's flat, it gets crushed. Miles has still got the best stash in baseball. I don't know how you hit against that. Miles is great, but their rotation is aging and it's starting to get up there in age, and that concerns me. We don't have the young gun. We don't have the flamethrower. We don't have the Hunter Green. We don't have the next up in the pitching rotation right now. The guys that we've tried to call up, our prospects in the farm system, give them a couple spot starts in the bigs, got rocked around a little bit, didn't look great. The pitching has some question marks heading into it. The offense does not. And the offense has been blazing red hot, and especially in the World Baseball Classic. A little guy by the name of Lars Nootbaar, best name in baseball.
Newt.
By the way, the last couple of years, we've really discovered that this guy can play some damn good baseball, and he hits for power. He hits in the gap. He's a good runner. He's a damn good fielder. Lars Nootbaar, stock rising. He has.
Is that the outfielder?
Was that?
Is that the outfielder?
Yeah, Lars.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Newt. Yeah, he's gonna have a big year. In terms of if you're a DraftKings person, if you are a fantasy baseball player, a daily fantasy guy, this is a guy that I want circled in my lineups more often than not because I think he produces, and I think you're going to get him at a low value too. Like I said, if you are, Lars Nootbaar is the guy you want, and then Goldie and Arenado in the middle of the lineup. You add Wilson Contreras, who's like just as good defensively as Yachty. Not just as good, little less, but still a damn good defender. Was probably the second best defensive catcher, and he's got some pop in the lineup that Yachty didn't have towards the tail end of his career. Welcome aboard, Wilson Contreras. Carlson coming back, Nolan Gorman. Oh, by the way, we've got 9,000 offensive prospects waiting to get their shot, and AAA team is going to be pretty good this year too. This is a deep baseball team, and this is going to be another yet successful baseball team. Yeah, again, I talk about depth a lot, and you're still hanging around with Paul DeYoung and Juan Yepes and Kizzy and Burleson sitting on the bench. St. Louis is going to win 92 games this year and make a solid run in the playoffs. It was unfortunate a year ago when they just got cold at the wrong time, ran into a red-hot Phillies team, and Philadelphia moved on and moved into the postseason. But the mark of any successful baseball team, the mark that you had a great year, was that you put yourself in a position to win a damn World Series trophy, and you can't do that unless you get to the postseason. St. Louis makes another return trip. They are still the cream of the crop in the NL Central. I know your Cubs fans out there are wanting to change that course of history in the next couple of years. It's not going to happen this year. Big Red still on top.
Yeah, so I'll mute you if I need to. So Gary Free Sr. Said Cards have the top spot and need to get off to a good start.
Mm-hmm.
You believe that if the Cards do not get off to a good start, if they get off to a slow start and get behind the eight ball, say 10 games or so, 10, 12 games,
Whew.
do you think that they – and say it's June.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're 10 to 12 games back June 1st.
Yep.
Do you think that they still have a shot?
Absolutely. And it's not necessarily they have to get off to a red hot start. They got to play solid baseball, right? Like everybody needs to get off to that to that strong start to the season and put yourself in a position to win that Central Division. I'll say this when I say I'm not worried about it. if they don't get off to a hot start, I'm not worried about it because that wild card and those extra wild card spots still exist. And even if they're not able to catch the top of the Central, I still think that they can catch a San Diego or a San Francisco or a New York Mets later on in the season and take over a wild card spot if needed. Here's the other reason that I love St. Louis as your closer of a baseball team, if you will. And you flash back 2 years ago when they made a incredibly magical run. Realistically, mathematically, zero shot at the very start of September to make a playoff run. And lo and behold, they not only got into the playoffs, they made a little bit of noise there because they went on this magical 17-game winning streak in the middle of the season out of absolute thin air, dust. The team was done and dusted. It was boring baseball. The fans checked out, and they're like, oh, by the way, we're going to win again, and we're going to win a lot, so hop on board. And a lot of those guys that were a part of that winning streak are still on this squad. So they have it in them. They know how to win baseball games. This is a winning baseball team with a winning mentality, and the idea of checking out of a season that early, I don't think exists in that clubhouse. It sure as hell doesn't exist in the fan base, and I know it doesn't exist in that clubhouse.
All right, so I feel like the episode has come to a conclusion here, but I think before we actually depart, I think, Ty, that since we're doing the division, and you as the Cardinals fan, me as the Cubs fan, I think we need to place a little wager on the season series.
Ooh. All right.
So let's put it out there that
how many runs you want?
whoever's team wins the season series,
okay,
the other person has to wear the other person's team's gear on the podcast during postseason.
On the following pod. Or yes. On the postseason.
On the postseason.
Yeah, that might be better to do on postseason. So then we have a little bit of time to go out and.
Oh no! Don't worry. I'll send you the merch.
I was gonna say I'll ship you some Cardinals gear to wear, big guy. I have plenty in the wardrobe. So if I ship you off 2 jerseys to wear on a podcast, I'm not gonna miss one. we got 7 others. Your wager is accepted.
Okay.
And I'll just go ahead and you send me your address right now. I'll go ahead and pop her in the mail for you. I'm that confident that we'll be okay in that season series. But I do expect it to be much more competitive than it was a year ago. I would expect Chicago to close that gap a little bit against the Cards. Closing thoughts.
Well, just 1 second, because I saw this today, and it made me, as a baseball person, and I know you as well. I knew you would. I knew you would like it as well. Right. So let's do this.
Rio Gomez is on the mound, a graduate of Desert Vista High School, not far from here. The son of our beloved late colleague, Pedro Gomez, and his mother, Sandy Gomez, is here watching. Sandy, born in Bogota, Colombia. It was years ago, Rich, that Pedro Gomez, our amazing colleague, had shared with Holbert Cabrera that Rio would be able to pitch for him one day in the World Baseball Classic. And now it's here. And I can tell you this, there are a lot of smiling faces and probably a lot of tears in that press box right next to all of you because of how much all of us love Pedro and how much Rio's story means to all of us.